So now let's talk about reflection. So reflection is a flip or a mirror of the object. And so for the sake of this video, we're going to talk about reflections across the x-axis, which is this line, and then the y-axis, which is our vertical line. So reflection, if we're going to reflect this across the x-axis, you can see that in the animation, it gives us a mirror of what our yellow heart is here. So you can see our yellow heart, the tip is at +2. In the reflection, the tip is at -2. So you can see that it's actually the same distance away from the x-axis. So let's go ahead and reflect our little smiley face across the x-axis. So you can see that reflection. They're the same distance. The top of the head is the same distance from the x-axis. And you see we have a mirror of these objects. So let's reflect our heart across the y-axis now. So we're talking about our vertical axis. So if we reflect it, you can see the animation gives us this distance of just 1 unit away from the y-axis. And you got the idea, we're using the y-axis. And if we do our mirror of our smiley face, you can see that they are the same distance away from the y-axis. So now let's get specific with this rectangle. So in reflection, we're going to be given some information. We're going to reflect it across the x-axis. And the label for this rectangle, we have point A, B, C, and D. So we need to some specific details that are going to help us out here. The x-coordinate is always going to stay the same. If we're talking about reflection across the x-axis, the x-coordinate is going to stay the same. And this time it's the y-coordinate that's going to have the opposite sign. And so in order to get the opposite sign, we're just going to multiply by -1 to help us out with the y-coordinate. So the math for this, so we have our points A, B, C, and D. To get to A prime, you can see that our x-coordinate stays the same, but our y-coordinate is what changes. So we just make it the opposite, or we multiply by -1. So to get B prime, our x-coordinate stays the same, and our y-coordinate is the opposite. So for C prime, if we're flipping across the x-axis, remember, x-coordinate stays the same, the y-coordinate changes. And for D prime, our x-coordinate stays the same, and the y-coordinate changes. And so in order to do this, we can see that our x-coordinate is supposed to stay the same. So we're going to label these A, B, C, and D again. Our y-coordinate becomes the opposite sign. And we can see that we now have a reflection. So we're going to label our rectangle. So for 3, -1 is going to be A prime. For 6, -1 is going to be B prime. And for 6, -6 is going to be C prime. And for 3, -6 is going to be D prime. So you can see that we're just reflecting. So A and A prime is the same distance from the x-axis. So that's kind of the way we need to do the reflection. Let's talk about if we're going to reflect over the y-axis here. So we identify the y-axis. And let's go ahead and label our rectangle here, A, B, C, and D. So to reflect over it, we realize that it's just the opposite of what we did for the x-axis. So this time, for reflecting over the y, the x-coordinate is going to get the opposite sign, which means that we're going to multiply our x-coordinate by -1. And our y-coordinate, remember we're flipping over the y-axis, the y-coordinate stays the same. So to get specifics here, so I'm going to label A, B, C, and D. So our specifics To get to A prime, we realize that our x coordinate is the one that changes, and our y coordinate, we notice that stays the same since we're reflecting over the y-axis. To get to B prime, we know that our x coordinate is the opposite and our y coordinate stays the same. We can keep that pattern going for C prime and for D prime. So all we notice is that to figure out over the y-axis, the y point stays the same. The x point, the x coordinate, that's the one that becomes the opposite. So if we're going to do this, we realize that the x takes the opposite sign, and the y coordinate stays the same, and we have this reflection. So in our original, we label it A, B, C, and D. In the reflection, we realize that point -3, +1 is A prime. And then we can go ahead and label our reflection here. So it's important that we are labeling all the vertices the same. So that way when we see the reflection should match up. So we can say that A prime is the same distance away from A from that y-axis.